We're glad to be joined by Senator Nicole Akins Boyd. She represents District 9. That's part of Lafayette County and Panola County. Joins us in studio in Jackson. She is chair of the Senate Universities and Colleges Committee. Senator, good morning.
Good morning. It's always a good morning when you get let in with the theme song of Dallas. You got to love that. So
that's big time. That was just for you by Lance.
I did save that just for her. So,
I love it.
Good. I'm glad you like that one. It's an old recording. I'm sorry it's poppy, but
I love it. I think it sounds great.
You are in Jackson, have had meetings going on this week. We'll get into some of those coming up in just a bit. But let's start with opioid settlement discussion. We talked a few weeks ago about that process. How is it moving forward?
They closed the application process last week, and there was 126 applicants. So what the committee will do now is they are breaking apart in subgroups. We have the applications that we are all scoring and looking at those applications, and then we'll be meeting back to look at that whole list. And we will make recommendations then to the legislature on priority funding of those proposals that we look at.
And how much money is it we're distributing? Is it $75 million?
Yeah, I think we're looking at roughly about $75 million. So we'll be looking at all of that. And I think I have heard there are some incredible proposals, really broad-based in what they're looking at, so that we can really tackle and address this problem in a comprehensive manner. And I'm really, there's been some articles lately in a couple of the papers. I'm thrilled with the process we're using, because I think we're putting together all of our experts in our state that really can look at this problem from a comprehensive outlook, and we can get the most efficient use of those dollars to really tackle this problem in a comprehensive manner. So.
There's so many ways that you can go about this, and I know you're just now kind of going through the proposals. Are some of those from organizations that are tied to either college campuses or high schools?
I have been told that we all are broken down in different committees with that. So I think mine is the Family Services Committee. So I'm going to be looking at proposals that really look at family issues and those. And so they're broken down in a number of different areas. I have heard that there are proposals that really are looking at services on our college campuses and surveillance on our college campus. So I met somebody last night who they said they had put one in regards to really looking at surveillance issues so that we can really know what's going on these campuses. And I think that's very important.
You said 126 proposals. Is that a number that is bigger than you expected, smaller? Is that kind of what you were hoping for? I mean, I'm assuming you would want a broad-based at least application pool to decide how this money gets allocated.
It's kind of what I had expected. I did work years ago kind of in grants and applications and things like that. And so I think you have really small organizations to large organizations that have looked at this. I've heard that there's, very comprehensive proposals from even members of our court systems and that are kind of broad-based and statewide. So I think you have organizations that have applied that serve just small communities to ones that will look at a statewide breadth and reach. So I'm very excited to see kind of what all of these proposals look like.
So this is one of the hats that you are wearing. Another hat that you are wearing that seems to be taking up a lot of time is the Senate Universities and Colleges Committee. I want to start here, and this, you can tell me this is out of left field and we need to go a different direction, and that's fine, but I have heard for a while now from different people, and it's kind of hard to find the numbers, to be honestly, so we've got 8 public universities in the state of Mississippi, and they are funded in very different ways, that there are schools that get significantly more money per student than other schools. And in particular, I've heard that Mississippi State and Ole Miss are at the lower end of the spectrum, despite the fact that they get more students and they're producing more than some of the smaller schools are in the state, and yet they are getting considerably less money per student. Can you shine some light on that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this is something we've been looking at in the legislature when we came at the beginning of our this last term. We held hearings with the House and the Senate. There were joint hearings. And I work very closely with my colleague in the House, Donnie Scoggins, who's the chair of universities and colleges over there. And so we held hearings on this, and it became apparent that there was a wide discrepancy what that per pupil funding was. So we started looking at IHL and how it's funded. We've asked IHL to look at this too, but basically, since according to a report that they released in May of 2005 this year, and we knew this from looking at this. They have been funded.
Sorry, May of 2025.
Yeah, May of 2025.
Okay.
They have been funded mainly through a base plus approach. So everybody was held harmless, and then maybe they got some more added to it. And so that did not account for declining enrollments or increasing enrollments, really. And so those adjustments really were not based on institutional need or enrollment numbers or achievement. And so one of the things that the legislature has been focused on, and we talked about it, and we actually had hearings. The College Board, we have told them that we are very interested in this, and this is what this is supposed to be moving to, is we want to see a performance-based model. We know that we have been very successful with our Department of Education and what they have done, really looking at performance metrics. And they have been doing this for quite some time now in the Department of Education. We literally have gone to 48th to 16th. And that's an astonishing thing. And if you look at how that we've made that change in those trajectories and how we've increased those reading scores and how we've increased all those high school things, you will see it is because of performance-based metrics. And the Department of Education, they've been successful, but they are still looking at increasing accountability models, making sure that the students are getting the highest performance that they can, and that we're getting that from students, because that's in the best interest of Mississippi that we do this. And so we have looked at this in regards to higher education, and we've got about 32 states right now that really have some aspect of a performance-based model within their funding. And we've been looking across the country of what those metrics are in the legislature, trying to make sure that we are that we will be looking at that. And the legislature is actually holding hearings December 8th and 9th, or having Senate and House hearings in regards to that. And we're going to be looking at those across the country, because we've got to get more efficient for those use of higher education dollars. About 16% of the state's budget is in higher education. So that's
16% of a
$7 billion budget is in higher education. And so we want to make sure.
So that's roughly $1 billion?
I'll come back with exact numbers. So I'll often say I don't do but it's a huge amount of money. And when you look at overall spending with that, so it's not quite $1 billion, but anyway, we are looking to make sure that we are efficient in those dollars in everything that we do. And so some of the things that we know, too, the challenges facing higher ed right now is we are facing an enrollment cliff that really starts. It's really been a slight going on, and then we know that this really hits in the fall of next year. You see declining populations across. So we have 8 universities across the state, and they are facing declining populations. And how is it they are going to best perform their missions with those declining population? And how are they going to be financially sound? So we really want to look at 2 aspects that we really want to see is what's your financial soundness, and then what are the performance metrics? Because we have vastly different performance metrics from our universities right now. We have 4-year graduation rates that range from 18 to 52%. That's a huge spectrum. And we do have some very high-performing universities, so I don't want people to think our whole system is messed up. We have some very high performers. 6-year graduation rates from 27 to 68. And so we've got all these different metrics that we really need to look at, but there's some other things that we need to look at as well. So,
all right, let's pick that up on the other side of this break. And I'm going to ask you, and I don't know if you've got the numbers handy, what are those dollar amounts that are allocated per student at the universities? We'll look at that. We'll also talk a little bit about what the funding model is currently, How are the dollars allocated currently by the IHL, and where does that money come from? What power does the legislature have? We'll get to that on the other side of the break. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. Nicole Akins Boyd, Senator and Chair of the Universities and Colleges Committee. Committee. I think that was an extra syllable there. We're back with you right after this. More MRC. Thanks for joining us. Mornings with Richard Cross. Lance is having too much fun behind the wheel. He's driving fast this morning. Glad to have you along. C-Spire text line open, 601-879-4395. Senator Nicole Boyd is my guest. She represents District 9, Lafayette County, and parts of Panola County. She's chair of the State Universities and Colleges Committee in the Senate. And I mentioned before the break, I feel like we need to assign numbers because it's one thing to kind of talk in the abstract. When you go, well, per student funding is there is a variance between schools. What is that variance? What are we talking about when we talk Ole Miss, Mississippi State compared to Delta State, Mississippi Valley State?
So I won't go through them individually, but I can tell you here's the and you're right, the numbers are very hard to get, and if you get them from multiple people, they will say multiple things. But generally, when you look at those in the abstract of what everyone can agree is, you're looking at about a $4,000 to $5,000 difference between a student at Mississippi State and Ole Miss versus what some of the other universities are getting per student.
$4,000 to $5,000 less per student?
Yes. And so that's very different than our community colleges, where our community colleges are funded by student. So, if you get $1 for a student at Hines Community College, you're going to get the same dollar. You're going to get $1 for the student at Northwest Community College. Now, what most people do across the country is when they look at students and reimbursement, they look at majors, they look at high priority majors, things that are important to the workforce in the state. And they give extra incentive. If you graduate a nursing student, if you graduate something that is a needed skill in that state, there are bonuses that you will get more per student. Also, sometimes it has to do with the cost of educating that student. Like if it's a particular thing that costs more money to do, they will, and it's something that the state needs. You've seen around the country where they give extra incentives for those. And it is very workforce driven. Right now, we're not as workforce driven as we need to be. And so that's one of the things that we want to look at in a new formula is something that really where we drive workforce in the state and look at the needs of the state and make sure that our universities and colleges are really producing the students that are needed for the workforce and the challenges of our state. We know that AI and all technology is going to be a huge aspect in our growing job sector across the state. And so we want to make sure that we are looking at really making sure that we have a workforce that can supply that. And that's part of really looking at this comprehensively. Many of the performance-based models across the state really are very aligned with their workforce, and they are producing that. So there's some other things, too, that are, as we're looking to this, too, that are...
Hold on, just say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm still hung up on this $4,000 to $5,000 difference per student. So you've got Ole Miss and Mississippi State with enrollments north of 20,000. And I understand that there's maybe an operating cost that has to go into this. But how is the deficit so big for the state's two largest universities? You're talking about the flagship university, the land-grant university, and how are these funds allocated? So the legislature says this is the money
for IHL.
But then IHL allocates those funds as they see fit?
So IHL does allocate those monies. And so
based on what?
Based on, right now, they've used this cost-based approach since basically 2012. So they did put, back in 2012, they really did do a performance-based budgeting model. But that model has not been implemented. They said it was implemented 2 years. I'm not sure about that. But it has not been implemented with integrity. And so right now, according to this report from NCHIMPS that came out in May 2nd of 2025, it states that the institutions have been funded mainly through a cost through a base plus approach. And so they used that base from 2012, everybody was held harmless, and that their funding was based on the amount that the institution receives the year before. And then there were some slight adjustments made on maybe a budgetary capacity, but there was not anything done on institutional need, on enrollment. That report really states that. This is their report. And so we know that basically it has been on this cost-based approach, and it has continued on basically since 2012. So this is, of great concern to the legislature. IHL has commissioned somebody to really look at a performance-based model. But the legislature is really pushing on this because we want to see IHL, we want to see these metrics improving. Right now, we have a population of only about 26% of our population in Mississippi has a bachelor's degree of some type. Okay. And so that is a great deal lower than we need for our workforce. And so we want to see an improvement in that. The state, through all the different organizations, business institutions, and all that, has a goal of 55% of some type of degree or certificate by 2030. And there'll be, I'm sure, people coming in here talking about that conference that's coming up and those goals. And so we need improved metrics and really getting our population more educated. And so we know we have this enrollment cliff coming up. We know that our universities and colleges mainly rely on students coming from high school as opposed to really looking at that adult ed population. This is what this report kind of looks at. And so we've got to see a performance-driven model where we really make sure that we are getting kids across the finish line. Here's the stat, though, that keeps me up at night. We are number one in the country, in the state, of making sure that we get kids from high school to some college entrance program, whether it be a community college or whether it be an IHL institution. After that first year, that number drops weird to 38th in the country.
In terms of finishing a program?
In terms of finishing.
Or just coming back for year two?
Just coming back for year two.
So retention is an issue. So
retention is a huge issue. And we've got some universities that are doing an incredible job at retention. They're very high performing on that. But what really should keep us up at night, this is one of the facts. We are known as the worst state in the country for student loan debt. And so 15.9%, almost 16% of our population carries student loan debt. What we've done to a student, a young person, is that we have put them in a system that was either the system wasn't prepared, the child wasn't prepared, probably a combination of both. We have encouraged them to incur the student loan debt because we have a high amount of our college students that are on Pell Grants and other loans and all of that. So they've now incurred this debt, but there's no degree. They're a dropout at that level. And so we've got to stop these practices. We've got to make sure that when we get these kids in school, that we can matriculate them through the process so that they actually graduate with a degree, because we've done them a lot more harm if they are graduating now with debt, or not graduating, if they are leaving the university not completing a degree and they've got that much debt. Yeah. Those are the things that really should keep us up at night as a state, because now they are in a workforce that they have student loan debt, they don't have this additional education. And look, we know that it is more difficult to get a student that has, we have a high Pell Grant rate here in the state. We know that we have economically challenged students in the state, and we know that they are much more of a challenge to get through. And we are wanting to see a model that really that rewards universities when they get these students through, because the students have other challenges, economics at home, other issues really that are challenging them, and they're going to take a little bit longer to get through. But that's what we've got to do. If we're going to move this state forward in job development and workforce, we've got to make sure that we're putting the right students into the IHL system. And then we've got to make sure that when we get them in that system, that they're finishing.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and this is philosophical in nature, and I guess if you've got time to hang for the next break, we can talk about this a little bit more because it's kind of a loaded question. There's no question that the college and university system is vitally important to the state of Mississippi. And I'm almost setting the community college system separately because I feel like, we talk about community colleges a lot, and it feels like that they are excelling and they are achieving kind of the mission that they are in place to be. It's either get students ready to make the step to a 4-year or be ready to enter the workforce. And it feels like that's happening at a pretty high level. But when you talk about graduation rates being low, when you talk about 8 schools at the college and university level and Mississippi State and Ole Miss, the two biggest, at a $4,000 to $5,000 per student deficit to other universities, are we operating a welfare system within the college and university structure where you have 2 high-performing institutions that are having to carry the weight of the other 6? And is that hampering them from being the best that they can be? So that's a big question. I'll let you answer that on the other side of the break. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm and SuperTalk TV. Back with you on Mornings with Richard Cross. Nicole Akins Boyd, Senator representing District 9. She's chair of the Universities and Colleges Committee in the Senate. Appreciate you staying over for one last segment. I realize I dropped kind of a bomb there as we were going to break, but I think it's a legitimate question when you talk about 8 schools in the state and you talk about the deficit that Mississippi State and Ole Miss have in terms of per student allocations, and then you talk about graduation rates at the bottom end of the spectrum and schools that financially might not be able to support themselves. Are Ole Miss and Mississippi State the benefactors to the rest of the state and a de facto welfare program for those schools that can't stand on their own 2 feet otherwise?
Well, and let me say this too. Mississippi State and Ole Miss receive less per student. They also, though, are they do have more out-of-state students, and that is helping fund those universities. But I just want to say, look, the numbers kind of tell a story, and I can see where you could draw some of those conclusions, but we do have some significant work that is going on around at a number of our IHL institutions.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I saw some really great presentations last week. The College Board did invite me to come attend their retreat where all the chiefs of the university did present. And I saw some tremendous work from Southern Mississippi of what they are doing to really make sure that they are being very efficient with the majors that they're offering. Also, to their what they've done to make sure that they are increasing that first to second year dropout rate and making sure that they're getting students across the finish line. And they've done some tremendous work in that. I saw some really interesting things that were going on at Alcorn, where they're really digging down in those numbers and doing that. You saw Delta State, which did a very, very impressive deep dive into their majors, what it was costing them, and really putting that university on a much better financial path than they had been. So there's some really amazing things that are going on in a number of these places. And I do think, too, it's very important for people to realize, too, our universities do have different missions. For example, Jackson State here, and they have an interim president right now who's doing an amazing job, but they're an urban university. And it very much has an impact in this Jackson area. So you see things across the state that these are universities. But what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we are measuring for performance. We can't just have some arbitrary base cost thing. We've got to make sure that we are measuring for performance and really looking at our universities.
So that you are rewarded for success.
Exactly. And right now, that is not the way the system is set up.
So is the IHL open to adopting a performance-based funding model?
Yes, they are looking at a performance-based budgeting model. The legislature is looking at this so that we're all on the same page as to what this looks like. But, we need to make sure that performance is driven and it's rewarded, and that this performance is aligned with what the state's workforce needs are. And those are all integral pieces. And so that's what we're saying is we've got to perform, and we've got to perform better. And this is what funding should be equated to, is looking at performance levels.
What level of oversight from the legislature exists with IHL? I mean, I know that the IHL is a constitutionally created entity, and the legislature allocates money to the IHL, and then it sounds like they spend it as they see fit. How much oversight does the legislature have on those actual allocations to individual universities?
We are the appropriating. I mean, the legislature, it always people, for years before we even entered the legislature holds the purse.
Sure.
So we are the appropriating authority.
But you write the big check
We
to
write
them,
the big
but I'm
check.
talking about how they distribute the money.
Yeah, but the legislature is very much can look at the performance of what those institutions are doing, just like, and that's the things we want to see. We want to see that this board is actually measuring and demanding performance at every level from these universities, and that these universities are financially sound. And so we want to see this performance be driven. And so that's what the legislature is really looking at. And we don't talk about it a lot, but we're looking at it across lots of different entities and agencies. And you see that when the legislature did this a number of years ago, my predecessor, Gray Tollison, was a huge part of this too, is really looking at education and how we account for those dollars. And that's the largest use of our state funds is our K through 12 funds. It's the largest portion of our state budget. And so what we see, and we had the state superintendent testify yesterday before us of what all they're doing to make sure that we are getting the most use of our dollars in the most effective way. And that's what we have to do in a small state with not a lot of revenue. We've got to make sure every dollar and every penny is spent to where it is going to create high performance.
You got to get the most bang for your buck.
Absolutely. So that's what we're doing with this, and that's what we're going to continue to hear.
Glad to hear that this is a conversation that is not going away. Senator Nicole Akins Boyd, thanks so much for your time this morning. Always enjoy the conversations.
Thank you.
We'll continue to talk about this with you. We'll get your reaction on the C Spire text line. Coming up to start the 8 o'clock hour, author and publisher Neil White from Nautilus Publishing Company will join us. More MRC with you after the news.